Okay, thank you for joining us today, everybody. It's lovely to have you all here for the final webinar in our three-part series. So throughout our series so far, we've been dissecting the recent findings of our threat report. And we wanted to know just how aware UK businesses are of bots and if they fully understand the threat to their business. In the final webinar in our three-part series, we will be discussing who takes responsibility for bot management in enterprise organisations. However, for any of you who may not have caught last Thursday's webinar, let's recap. Earlier this year, we spoke to 200 enterprise businesses across travel, entertainment, e-commerce, and the financial sector to get a broad picture of how bots are understood and protected against. So Tom Platt, Netacea's head of e-commerce, is going to be leading today's discussion. Tom works with leading e-commerce, fintech, gaming, and media organisations to help them understand and quantify the impact of bots. Tom works closely with Netacea's largest customers to ensure they stay ahead of the latest bot challenges, whilst collaborating with Netacea's product and threat teams to research emerging bot trends across industries. But before we jump into the focus of today's webinar, Tom is going to give us an overview of what bots are and how they are affecting businesses around the world. Over to you, Tom.
Hey, Danny. Thanks for having me here today, and great to be speaking with everyone. Yes, as you mentioned, we're just going to do a very sort of quick intro on what are bots, what do we define as bots here at Netacea, and really, you know, what could some of those bots be doing. I think it's becoming more and more common knowledge that the internet is full of bots. Bots are both a good and a bad thing, but I think typically we'd say, I think the current stats are that around 40% of all internet traffic as we see it today is made up of bots. Here at Netacea, we class bot traffic as any request that's made by an automated process rather than being triggered by a human action. So pretty much anything that's being done in an automated fashion multiple times across multiple websites, you know, we class as bot traffic. But there are really two sides to that bot traffic, and it's really important, I think, to mention that there are both good and bad bots. Not everything is bad. Not all of that 40% of traffic on the internet is bad. There are certainly lots of good bots out there. Bots are really key to many businesses that we work with. Some that everyone will be familiar with, such as search engines, Google, Bing, Yandex, that are really key to a lot of businesses' success. But equally, there'll be bots that people within those businesses use, such as uptime checkers, vulnerability scanners, SEO tools that many different divisions within a business might be using, and really not everyone in that business might be aware that they're being used on their site, but certainly lots of businesses use lots of bots for good things. Equally, where there are good bots, there are also bad bots that pose some real risks and challenges to businesses. So, you know, some of the things that we see are things like credential stuffing, where people are trying to use bots to access your customers' accounts. We also see fake account creation, where we're seeing people try and use accounts to exploit offers, or attacks where people are using bots to try and verify and check stolen credit card details. And that's just a number. There are loads of different examples of bad bots. We're probably going to touch on some of them as we talk through this today. But I think it's also really important that we just call out that bots are very different from hacking. You know, a hacker, when they are trying to get into your system, they're trying to do something that is effectively not normal. They're trying to do something that is like an SQL injection. They're trying to do something that wouldn't be normally expected, and they're trying to find a vulnerability, a hole, and to work their way through that. Something that essentially shouldn't be there, an open door that should have been shut. That's what hackers are looking for. And, you know, those things do look malicious. They look very different to normal traffic. Whereas a bot effectively is something that typically is carrying out an activity that would normally be quite normal on your website. It might be trying to log in. It might be trying to check prices. But they are doing it at such a volume, in such a pace and in an automated way that it's actually causing a lot of problems and can cause a lot of risk for businesses. On top of that, I think that it's worth noting there's a whole marketplace and ecosystem behind these bots. It is not just one person sat behind the machine trying to target you. Of course, it could be, but really there's multiple tiers to the bot ecosystem that we see here at Netacea. And the first part is compute. There's lots of people out there, lots of people selling free compute, stolen compute where they've hacked into servers, gained access, stolen people's accounts, and people can effectively use that compute to launch attacks. We also see people selling and giving away credentials that people can use. So stolen and breached data is out there, very easy to get hold of. And that's, again, another group of people that are a part of this mix. On top of that, there are businesses that steal and sell bandwidth from consumers like you or I, where we might have downloaded an app and given them consent to use our bandwidth. And they're effectively reselling that bandwidth onto people to allow them to distribute and mask attacks. As well as that, there are people that you make the tools. So it's very easy to go online, find a tool that you can use to create a bot, put it on a server, and launch that attack. And these tool people will even configure that tool for you to target whatever site you wish to target with. And so there's loads of different parts of this ecosystem. And there are players within it that offer full wraparound services with 24/7 support. So it might be that there is, you can go to a one-stop shop where you can get all of this stuff, the tool, the credentials, and the support to launch an attack, really from one person. So it's a huge ecosystem. There's a lot of money in this. There's a lot of very sophisticated tools, people, and techniques that are being used to launch these bot attacks. It is not just like kind of a small individual. There's a whole marketplace out there. And of course, the spoils of what people are getting out of these attacks, there are huge marketplaces, both on the dark web and the public internet, where you can find accounts for sale, tools for sale, and all of these type of things that are purchasable out there for pretty much everyone to launch quite a complex attack quite quickly.
Great, thank you, Tom, for laying the foundations there for us for what bots are, really fundamentally, and explaining a bit about the ecosystem, because that's going to be important as we continue through the webinar. So we have had a couple of questions come through on the chat already. That's great, please keep them coming, and we will make sure all of your questions are answered in the Q&A section at the end of today's webinar. So during parts 1 and 2, we discovered that there is a high understanding of bots across all verticals and the threats they pose. There seems to be very little need to explain to businesses that bots can be a problem. They not only understand that they exist, but they also understand why they're a problem. However, does this higher awareness of the bot threat mean enterprises understand the reality of the risks that they are exposed to? This is a really subtle but important difference. And one way to look at the problem is what parts of a business's online estate they consider to be most at risk. What we can see at a glance is that most businesses think websites and mobile apps are roughly equally as likely to suffer a bot attack, while their APIs are ranked the least likely by a considerable stretch. This could be due to a number of reasons. For instance, could be due to a lack of actual available API, but we think it's probably more likely to indicate a lack of awareness and visibility, or perhaps thought around whether bots are something that are, would actually hit their API. But before we go into this further, I'd like to have a quick dig into how this is split by vertical. We can see here that travel and e-commerce and financial services organisations all rank their website as most likely to suffer a bot attack. The travel industry, significantly so. Tom, why do you think travel, of all the industries we spoke to, stated that their website was most likely to be targeted by bots?
Sure. So I think it's a really interesting point, Danny, and it does sort of marry with what we see in the internet and what we see across those businesses and what people tend to talk to us about. I would say the travel industry is one of the real sort of pioneers of bots. If you think about the travel industry and its nature, it is one where there are lots and lots of aggregators and a limited amount of stock, but it's quite clear when we're shopping for a holiday or a hotel room, there is only one hotel room or maybe 10 hotel rooms in that hotel, but there are literally hundreds of different places we can go to get them. So the online travel industry itself is made up of tons of large aggregators and people sharing and passing data, using bots to scrape sites to get their stock and inventory, and then display them and try and get them at the best price. So the travel industry is one that has grown up on this sort of aggregation and sharing of data. We think of Skyscanner, that is effectively a Google, a scraper of flight data. So it's no surprise that they see a lot of bot attacks. And, with obviously all of the bots and the ecosystem that they have, there are, of course, some real challenges and some people that try and exploit that. So one thing we do see a lot in the travel industry, which we perhaps don't really see as much of in other industries, is inventory hoarding and really, really aggressive price scraping. So in terms of inventory hoarding, it's a very easy industry where you can potentially hold stock because there is only that one hotel room, there is that one flight ticket. You can go onto a website and hold that in a basket and make that unavailable, and potentially make your stock that you're trying to sell at that time to other people look really attractive because there's nothing else on the market because you're holding stock. So I think the travel industry is one that's grown up with bots. It's one that's very advanced, and it's one that does represent a big target for both, legitimate business reasons, but also the nefarious actors as well.
Absolutely, and it's going to be really interesting to see how the nefarious actors, as you actually term them, behaviour changes in the onset of our ever-changing environment at the moment. Obviously, travel industry has changed a lot. It's been impacted by COVID, perhaps, as one of the biggest industries been affected by it. So it'll be really interesting to see how behaviours change over the coming months in that environment. Okay, so we're going to move on to mobile apps, which entertainment businesses identify as the most likely to suffer a bot attack. Tom, do you think that these results reflect the reality of where businesses across these industries are most vulnerable to attacks?
Yeah, sure, Danny. So I think, is it what we see in what we're seeing in attacks and as they're changing? No, I think the attackers are maybe perhaps one step ahead here. But in terms of the entertainment industry saying that mobile apps are the most likely place to be targeted, I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. I think when we think about things like gaming apps, Spotify, all these different services that we have, I would say myself as a consumer, we have those on our mobile apps, and we have them more on our mobile apps than we do in other places. And so, I think that a large amount of traffic is driven by to this industry via their mobile apps. So it's no surprise that they are seeing, that they're a big place for attack. Mobile apps, certainly are one of the key places attackers target. But what I would say is that I think we're starting to see more and more that people are going beyond the mobile app, and then now starting to target the APIs. And I think that's something that we'll probably come on to cover in a little bit as well, Danny, won't we?
So what do we know about API security? Constantly, web application firewalls, API gateways are powerless against bots that target open APIs or gain access to APIs using the correct keys. It will be the intent and behavior that's going to determine whether it's coming from bots or from humans. Our research has seen a surge in the targeting of APIs and especially mobile apps. If bot mitigation on the website is excellent, the last thing when it comes to mobile apps, exactly what the criminals are going to target. They're always going to go for the easiest point of entry. As you've just quite rightly said, Tom, it is going, the attack target is going to change. So would you be able to provide us with a little bit more insight into this change in attack targets? What have your customers been experiencing? What are they asking you about API security?
Yeah, sure, Danny. So I guess when it comes to sort of the bot industry, I think I'm in my 6th year, so I'm becoming a bit of a dinosaur. And, I think when we first started out, we would quite frequently deal with people coming to us and saying, can we get some bot protection for our website? We're having attacks on our website. Can you help us protect the website? That was the real, that was what we were seeing many, many years ago. I think in the past couple of years, we've had a lot of people saying, can we get protection for our mobile apps? Can we get protection for our website and our mobile apps? I think increasingly the trend that we're starting to see right now is that people are coming and saying, we need some protection for our APIs, and I think this is just something that is just the way the nature the attackers are evolving. As businesses have started to become more aware of bots, as they put protection in around their websites and their mobile apps, they've left the door open. And the next place for attackers to target is APIs. And APIs actually make a really interesting and useful target for bots. If we think about APIs in their very nature, they are programmatic things. They're a lot easier to code against and target than necessarily a website or a mobile app. So they do make a really good target for an attacker to try and break into a system. I think the final thing I will say about APIs is if we look at the nature of the protection that most businesses offer, a lot of that is JavaScript based, and that is very challenging. It's very challenging to use that kind of attack detection on APIs. So I think the market for protection and the solutions that are out there for people to protect those APIs is also a lot smaller. So I think that's the reason why we're certainly seeing increases in people coming to us asking about protecting APIs. We're seeing increases of attacks on APIs, and I think that's just the way the industry is going. It's just a cat and mouse game against these attackers, and I think APIs is the latest door that are really the favourite target of the attackers.
Yeah, and it's always going to be the nature of cybersecurity that games those questions. That's what we want to see. It means that so all of this my audio dropped off there. I think we should be back on.
Yep, I can hear you now, Danny.
So great, thanks, Tom. Thank you for confirming. Jumping back in, we left off there. Reasons are taken up by bots, but this is actually quite a low estimate. When enterprises estimate such a low amount of consumption, we think that they might only be catching self-identifying bots, or perhaps they're using methods of detection that aren't quite doing the job required. Because our experience suggests that this consumption is actually much higher, in extreme cases, as high as 50%. And Tom, we know that this is the case in e-commerce and gaming in particular, where scraper bots are rife. Can you provide any poignant examples of the damage you've seen such bot attacks cause, and why you think it's important to minimise bots' consumption of resource?
Yeah, sure, Danny. So, I think, in gaming and in the travel industry, I think we quite commonly see anywhere between 40 to 60% of their traffic being made up by bots. So in those industries, where scraping is really aggressive, it's really rife, we see sometimes more than what you said there, sometimes more than 50% of that traffic and that CPU utilization being caused by bots because they are so aggressive and so rife in those industries. I think it's important when we talk about how much resource bots are consuming that we don't always just look at resource as a whole. One of the things that we have seen in the past is you look at a retail site that's being targeted a lot by credential stuff and attacks. Sometimes we see upwards of 90% of all of the logins on that retail site being bot attacks. And so, sometimes we see, because of scraping, we see the whole sort of site CPU utilization being caused by bots up to 40%. But then also, sometimes certain parts of your site that might be vulnerable to bots, it's worth looking at those. Sometimes we see a lot of CPU when it comes to sort of the login and identity processes, bots can really churn up and use that utilization. This is, of course, going to be really important to a lot of people we're speaking to today. I know there's a lot of retailers listening in today who will be preparing for, potentially what is looking like the largest online Christmas sort of Black Friday shopping period in history. And if you're in that situation where, CPU utilization is critical and you're absolutely trying to get the most out of your site, serve your customers as fast as possible and serve as many as possible, the last thing you really want is a bot taking up 20 to 30% of that traffic. We have spoken to retailers in the past who have, in effect, been taken down by aggressive price scraping when it comes to these big sales days, because the minute they launch their offers, all their competitors want to know the pricing. It's obviously we can throw figures and facts around, but this is constantly in the news right now. We're seeing how the new launch of the Xbox, the new launch of the PlayStation 5, and the NVIDIA graphics cards are all going and getting sold out pretty much instantaneously, with large quantities of them available on the internet. So it's not just us giving everyone stats, but we are seeing that large quantities, up to 90% of some major releases of things that are out there, are actually being purchased by bots. And so, if we follow that back, those bots are absolutely eating up all the resources and things on the website to make those purchases. So I think it's something that we're well aware of. I think it's well documented, and I think especially as we come into this peak period, whether it be for retailers and the Christmas shopping period, whether it be for the gaming industry and key events, people really need to be aware of what bots are using on their systems, and it is normally quite surprising just how much resource bots can take to serve.
Yeah, and pointedly, as you mentioned there, obviously we're approaching this peak retail period, and every ounce of resource is absolutely vital to making sure businesses are staying online and making sure that they're available for their customers, especially, again, as we've mentioned previously, we're in a really shifting environment at the moment, so it's more important than ever. We have spoken about it before as a business, and we're going to be keeping an eye on it for our customers over the next few weeks and following up with some more, hopefully, useful content for you that will give you a little bit of insight into how bots are behaving at this really uncertain time. So hopefully we'll have more to share as we progress through the year. They know what the gaps. So our respondents were unaware of the ecosystem around bots, with just 1% aware of marketplaces that sell on stolen accounts. Tom, you'll be glad to know I've got a couple of questions for you here. So I know this is a topic that you've researched a lot over the years. First of all, can you explain how these marketplaces work and the threats they pose to businesses?
Yeah, absolutely, Danny. So, all the way through this webinar and all the way through this series, we're talking about bots, which are effectively being launched for people, typically for some form of financial gain. One of the most common sort of things that we see in that is people targeting accounts. They're either targeting accounts to use those accounts to do things, either shop or get content, or they're targeting those accounts to get value out of them, be that money, or be that vouchers that they can then spend elsewhere, be that coupons, offers, gifts, whatever it may be. And around that, there are whole marketplaces, not just on the dark web, but on the public internet, where you can go on and you can quite clearly see that there are hundreds of these accounts out there. Think Spotify, think Amazon Prime, Netflix. A quick Google will quickly return lots of people selling these accounts out there. Particularly, I would say the biggest target for this is anyone sort of offering digital services. I think we've spoken before, Danny, about how your Spotify account has been hacked before. My Amazon Prime account has been also hacked as well. And the way that these businesses operate today, it is very much about growth, about as low friction as possible, and about onboarding customers. So, when we're trying to sign up for a new streaming service, we don't want to be going through two-factor authentication. We don't have to have a huge, long and complex password. And we don't have to really think about the security of it. It's not our bank account, and customers don't really think about that. So it is rife, this use of people, stealing a Spotify account or a Netflix account, getting into your account, selling your password to someone, and then people using that. And And the real challenge for these businesses, of course, because of the way they're structured, is, you can stream people's music, and that customer might never even notice. The business might never notice. And of course, once you've streamed something or watched a movie, that's something that you can't really get back once that's been stolen from someone. And there is such a quantity of these things on sale. A lot of the people selling them sell them with warranties. So if someone does get locked out of an account, they guarantee to give you a new one in 24 hours. And I think that just reiterates just the amount that are out there. There are literally thousands of accounts. So these people selling them aren't worried if one gets locked out, because they constantly have another one ready to go. And you can get services at very, very cheap prices. And I think that's attracting more and more people.
Absolutely, because like you say, it's the professionalization of the service that is legitimizing it. And so on to my next question. How do customers react when you tell them not only that these marketplaces exist, and as you said, that they are so readily available, easy to use, but their information that's been stolen perhaps during a previous data breach is sale on these marketplaces?
Yeah, and what I will say is, because of the nature of the service we offer, quite frequently, most people that speak to us are aware that something's going on. They might have done their own research, and I would say people are getting much better at sort of becoming aware of this, making themselves aware. If they have had an attack, looking at why that was an attack, what are people doing and why they're doing it. So I think less and less it's becoming a surprise, although our survey would say otherwise. But people I speak to, I'd say less and less it's a surprise that this is happening. But I think, the real surprise for them when we do the research, quite frequently we'll see an attack. And, it's not the service we offer, but our threat research teams investigate attacks, tooling that's used, and track that back and look at that on the dark web. Effectively, we can trace these attacks back, and quite often we can speak to the customers we're working with and say, did you know that these are accounts on sale here? And they're not normally surprised that they're on sale, but what I would say is the things that people are surprised when they look at these marketplaces is just the professionalism of these marketplaces. These are professional marketplaces. They're not hidden. They're on the public internet. You don't necessarily have to use Bitcoin to purchase. Anyone can just go on and purchase these accounts. These marketplaces have reviews and feedback and comments so that you can trust them. And they offer 24/7 support, which is just completely unheard of previously. And I think that's a real big surprise for a lot of people that we speak to, that it is that real ecosystem that is almost it appears as credible as a normal shop. So for sure, I think that's one of the big surprises. I think secondly, the other thing I would say is quite often people are surprised by the sheer volume. Just the sheer volume of accounts that are on sale. They may be aware there's a couple of hundred. They may not be aware that there's tens of thousands across multiple sites. And I think that's the other thing that tends to surprise people when we're sharing some of this research.
Absolutely, because as you mentioned earlier, for a lot of people, particularly from the consumer end, you don't tend to be aware of it until somebody is using your account and certain changes have been made. So for instance, sticking to the Spotify analogy, it's somebody's listening to music that you've never perhaps heard of, or just, you've got no recollection of listening to. And that's the first sign that you have that somebody else is using your account besides yourself. So yeah, just as an indicator of the size of the marketplaces and the problem. Okay, so let's move on to how well businesses understand the level of bot activity on their site. We established earlier in the webinar that enterprises are underestimating the level of bot activity on their site. And yet here we can see that close to 100% are confident in the accuracy of their web analytics, which play a significant role in making informed business and marketing decisions. Bots are increasingly sophisticated, but the more mundane bots are still in use. Many of these low-hanging fruit bots can be caught with traditional signature detection, but the more sophisticated bots continue to circumvent those measures as a matter of course. In fact, we know that the authors of sophisticated bots actively reverse engineer client-side bot management technology to send false signals and bypass the measures that they put in place. So security teams think everything is absolutely fine because on the surface, it looks fine. Tom, why do you think businesses are so confident in their ability to detect bots?
Yeah, so I think there's two parts to this. I think firstly, for a business to come out and say they're not confident in their analytics, that's a very hard thing for a lot of businesses to admit. It's a very new concept. But inherently, if we can all agree that 40% of all traffic on the internet is bots, potentially 1 in every 5 requests on a website is from a bot, and we've not got a pane of glass that says that this many requests on our websites are from bots, then I think we can all say that with comfort that our analytics perhaps could be more accurate. That's for sure. So we quite frequently speak with people. We had a customer towards the back end of last year who spent millions of pounds in advertising every single month, and they were making those advertising investments based on their analytics. But what they found was that actually, rather than advertising the products that people wanted, they were putting their investment into products that their competitors were scraping, because that's where all of their traffic was going, because it was such a proportion. So I think, it's difficult for businesses to be open and honest about the analytics, and especially when there's no real clear solution. We look in Google Analytics and there's a button we can click that says it filters out bots, and it definitely will filter out some bots, but will it filter them all out? Is that what Google's core business is? No, I think those are things that can perhaps give people some false senses of security. I think the other thing I would say is that it's such a new and emerging market, that there are all these quick solutions. We can flick on this anti-bot list from our CDN provider. We can flick on this bot protection in our WAF vendor, which is IP rate limiting. There are all these different things that people can switch on to give them comfort. But, as this market evolves and people learn more, I think we're starting to find that, bots are a lot more sophisticated than quite often people first think. And, they are getting around a lot of protection people put in place that they do think are working originally.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you stated very rightly, this was a very hard question for businesses to answer, because saying that you don't have confidence in your web analytics is saying that you're second guessing a lot of the decisions that you're making about your marketing activity, and often in particular is where this comes into play. And we asked it because it reflects the conversations that we've actually been having with some of the people that we've been engaging with recently. So we thought it was an interesting point that we wanted to know a bit more about, and it's a good thing for us to continue talking about as we move forward. And so what we're learning is that enterprises are perhaps overconfident in their bot management strategy, when in fact, what they have in place is often not enough. Linked to a clear we discussed in part 2. It ultimately leads to organisations losing sight of attacks and falling foul of greater threats. Last week, we discovered that ownership of bot management is often split far and wide throughout an organisation, and very rarely is one person or department responsible. While the average business splits ownership across 3 or more departments, in extreme cases, this can be shared across up to 7. Tom, in your experience, what do you think the impact of splitting the ownership of bots can be?
So I think it can be really complex. I would say the key thing for any business is the business needs a key single owner of bot protection, because at the end of the day, if a bot attack happens, a new bot comes in, one person has to be able to make a quick decision on whether that should be stopped or not. And I do think it's really important that businesses have a single owner. I think it's absolutely no surprise, though, that we see multiple owners in businesses. We see this time and time again in a project where we might be brought in to stop a price scraping attack that's causing a huge issue for a business in terms of the infrastructure team. And then whilst in that environment, we see that they're actually suffering from credential stuffing attacks, and we need to work with the security team. And of course, as we reduce that bot traffic on that website, then the marketing team say, hey, what's going on with analytics? So it's absolutely no surprise that there are multiple stakeholders. There really should be, in any business that's looking at a bot strategy, there really should be a consensus across the different departments, and there should be awareness of what's going on. But I do think it's very important that we have a single owner. I think that's for sure. I think that helps with any project, not just bots.
Absolutely. And so in the instances where there is a single owner, I'm aware that what you're able to see on your screen might not be what I intend it to be at this point, because we do seem to have a slight delay. And so I'm going to dictate what the figures are that you should be able to see. So what we found is that when in instances where there is a single owner, 53% stated that the owner is a CISO or a head of IT security, and 26% said that the owner is a head of website development. And so what I'd like to know is, following on from your previous statement there, Tom, about the value in various departments, kind of once you've lifted the lid and realised that there is value in cross-departmental ownership. In what instances and what industries do you think we're getting this split, where we've got this huge portion where we've got the CISO or head of security who is the identified single owner, and then in the other organisations you've got a substantial portion where it's the head of website development, and that sort of role? What would you like to offer on these stats?
Yeah, thanks, Danny. I mean, I don't think these figures are a big surprise, certainly for us. I would say that if you look at the nature of bot protection as it's evolving, I would say that typically people think, right, bots, DDoS, bots, WAF, and then bot protection. I think genuinely the way people are going in terms of bot protection, they're seeing it, they originally start with DDoS to stop large volumetric bot attacks, right? And then they look at their WAF and they do things like IP rate permitting. And then, when they need something more advanced, they look to bot detection. And I think because of that group of tools, because of the nature of where this sits, I think it's really standard place for that to sit with the security team, because typically it is them that deal with the WAF and the DDoS protection. So I think that's pretty common for us to see. I think the real point of where we're seeing this head of online activities, head of online development, I think there are cases where it isn't necessarily the security team, but an individual who's highly impacted by those bot attacks. It could be a retailer where they're doing a launch of a product and effectively bots are buying up that product, as we've seen in the press. And in that case, that might be the head of brand or the head of PR or the head of marketing who's really been impacted by the upset customers who can't buy products, right? And they might be the ones that deal with that. It could be the same in ticketing, where, it's the people who are responsible for the sales of tickets that actually want to take control of the sales of tickets, not necessarily security. I would say the other place we typically tend to see it as well would be in infrastructure. We've spoken a lot about how these bots can have a huge impact on infrastructure. So it is quite common for us to see infrastructure take a lead on a bot project because their end goal is to protect that. So I think no surprise, I think it's very common for a CISO, head of security, to own the bot problem, and I think that's typically a place most businesses should start. But depending on the industry, the niche of the problem and what you're trying to solve, I think that's where we tend to see some different roles come in and where we have some interesting conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, here we can see a bit more detail on when there is a split of ownership, where that tends to rest. And so, interestingly, it does not predominate with security and IT, but it filters across operations and even to marketing, which reflects what you just said there, Tom, about brand needing to be in the loop. And then the overall picture we have is that when there is a lack of clear ownership, it's not long before the issues start to fall through the cracks, because you've got this cross-departmental diffusion of responsibility. And so there is going to be that need to align all of those internal investors. And now, Tom, I'm going to hand back over to you here as you round up a little bit about accuracy and detection, and why, I suppose, why that overall need for responsibility and visibility within business at the moment is becoming more and more important as the bot threat evolves.
Sure, thank you, Danny. So I think just a really good point to end. We've talked about how people might be overconfident in the basic bot protection they might have. They might think that they have this solved in by a WAF, or really just not have a large awareness of the problem. I think just showing you some stats from what we've seen. In the bottom right corner here, you can see 75% of, this was a business that was thought that they had bots under control. They were using a WAF to control that. They were putting a lot of effort into that. But what we found that WAF was just missing 75% of the bot attacks that they were seeing. So we were able to have a huge impact in a really short period of time for that business. As you can see, the bots slope off. But again, that's a business there that felt confident they had this under control, but actually lacked the visibility within their current tooling. In the left side, we're looking at people that are using some very basic bot management and fingerprinting. That was doing a good job. It was spotting a lot of bot attacks, but again, because it was using legacy technology and bots were working their way around it, we were able to spot 38% more bot traffic, and that was actually 38% more credential stuff and attacks on that site. Particularly because bots were working their way around that standard fingerprinting JavaScript detection. And a new approach was needed that was harder for them to work their way around. And I guess the final one, the top right-hand corner, this is a business that is very switched on with regards to bots. They have teams, they have tooling, they have everything in place. But what we can see is they were doing a great job with big and volumetric bot attacks. But there is just this low and slow, complex and sophisticated attacks that tend to evade quite a lot of detection in the marketplace today that just go unnoticed unless you really have a specialist looking at this sort of stuff for you. So I think the thing I would say is that, it's that bots are there. We can all agree that they make up a large proportion. I think the key thing for everyone is that they get a view on this and know, if they have something in place, is it working? And if they don't, should we get some visibility and see if we need to have something in place? And I think that sort of just takes us to the closing, really, Danny. And so, I guess just to summarize, hopefully after this series of webinars, this being the final of the 3, we can all agree that bots are out there. Bots are crucial to businesses, but they also pose a real threat and can be a real risk to brand reputation and can cause millions in losses to business if not handled correctly. Also, I hope everyone has taken away from this that it is important that you have to be able to say what bot traffic is on my website and what is it doing, because there should be no doubt that there will be bot traffic on every website out there, and it will be good and it will be bad. But the real important thing for everyone out there is to understand: is it good? Is it bad? And if it's bad, what is it doing? And how do we take control of it and protect ourselves? I think if that's one thing that we take away from today, I think that's the key. And then obviously, once we've got that visibility, building a strategy as a business to what do bots mean to us, what's important to us, because bots can drive revenue, and how do we deal with them? I think that's also really important. So I guess the takeaway: bots are out there, and they are a threat. It's really important you understand them, and it's also important once you understand them, you have a strategy to handle them.
And as we keep saying, it's all about visibility and having an understanding of how exactly bots are affecting your business, and your business is a unique case. So whether it's the good bots, the bad bots, or in the middle, it's just having that thorough understanding. Okay, so we have had throughout. So I'm going to start with what by a human, e.g. a scheduled download from a website, is it still bot traffic based on your definition?
That's quite a challenging question, I would say. But I think if it's an automated process that is frequently downloading from a website, then yes, we would class that as a bot. Whether it's good or bad, I think would be under interpretation of what it was doing. If it was the case where someone's clicking an action and then getting a bot to go off and do something, I think that's a bit different. Hopefully that answers that question.
I think so, but I read tricky ones to establish. But we will make sure that we follow up on that one a little with our lovely question asker. Okay,
The next one, how with bots, and how do you handle bots using capture farms similar to sneaker bots?
So that is a really good question. I think me and the team here have done quite a bit of research into capture farms, and they're a fascinating thing. I think it's really important, firstly, that we understand that capture isn't the best way to deal with bot attacks. You know, it is certainly an easy way for us to put in place, and probably one of the lowest risk approaches for dealing with bot attacks. Because we know if we get that categorization wrong, the customer can go through capture, and sadly, people are becoming more and more immune to that and doing it, and then get through to the website and buy. So I would say that, you know, capture is definitely a mechanism that's out there. How do we deal with these situations where there are capture farms? I think, number one, you've got to be monitoring. I think having a strategy to deal with bots that isn't just capture is one of the key things, particularly if we're talking about on sales like sneaker bots, where we know they are rife. Looking at other forms of mitigation, such as blocking, or looking at mitigation within a platform, maybe stopping the sale, querying the sale, asking for validation. There's lots of great things that are being done in that industry, where if we think someone's going to make an automated purchase, putting them through a bit of a challenge, making them go through that, making them authenticate again, and testing them is the way we see things going in that industry. So I think, yeah, number one, I think, you know, capture farms will evade capture. I think there is no way around that. You know, we can look at the times, and we can look at the way the captures are being completed. But I think the key thing is to having a really strong strategy about how we handle the bots, and also, you know, not just relying solely on capture, and potentially in those events being able to ramp up our mitigation if they are passing capture and we see that capture farms are in use, and you know, that was the original plan.
Yeah. Okay. So I think, you know, something that I particularly mentioned as we've been going through today, landscape due to the pandemic. And so we have had a question through about traffic changes in particular. So Tom, what do you think has traffic in particular has changed as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, so it's a fascinating question, and I think lots of security providers are out there saying that it's the pandemic and everything's a lot worse and it's all really scary and all really bad. I think what I will say and what we have seen is, for some people and not for everyone, we have seen an increase in bot attacks. We can't quite figure out why. It could be that there's more people available, more people have more time, or it could just be a natural increase in bot attacks that we are pretty much seeing year on year anyway. But we are certainly, for some businesses, seeing more attacks than we were pre-COVID. I think the other thing I would say about this is it kind of changed the market a little bit. We've seen, you know, in shopping baskets, trying to get a delivery slot when supermarkets and lockdown was at its height. You know, we've seen people use bots to try and get checkout slots for people. So we've seen bots being used in different ways because of the way businesses have reacted to COVID. So we've certainly seen bots evolve and change to deal with some of the things that businesses are doing. I think the other thing there is a lot of talk about at the moment is that we are seeing a booming increase in sort of scalping bots. You know, previously these were just sneaker bots, and it was really a sort of quite niche industry. It was either for concert or event tickets, or it was for limited edition clothing. But we're certainly seeing that expand out. Whether that's because of COVID, I don't know. But we are seeing it span out to launches. If you look at what's happened in the press with Nvidia's launch of their graphics card, where bots hit sites so aggressively they had to stop selling it online. You know, we are seeing people try and do really sophisticated things to buy up all the latest stock of something that come out and really profit off the back of that. Whether that's specifically driven by COVID or whether that's an evolution in the market, we don't know just yet. But that is another thing that we are seeing right now.
It's really interesting because what fundamentally comes down to is the utilization of automation, and it just tackle it is with better automation, automated security in place. Okay, thank you, Tom, for answering so many of those questions so thoroughly. And I appreciate that today. And so hopefully we will be able to provide a little bit more insight. And you'll be able to add digestion of today's content. So I'd just like to say a big thank you to everybody for joining us over the last 3 weeks. We really hope you found our deep dive into of our threat report insightful. Today's webinar recording, so you can watch again on demand. And if today's session has got the cogs whirring and inspires you to ask more questions about bots, do get in touch at hello@netacea.com. Again, big thank you to everybody, and we hope to see you again soon.